Welcome to John Carter Stories. I stood outside Courtroom 3B at the Ontario Superior Court, my hands trembling as I watched through the glass window. There was my son, Daniel, straightening his expensive silk tie with that confident smirk I'd come to dread. 42 years old, with my same broad shoulders, my same strong jawline, but his eyes, God, his eyes had gone cold. Where had my boy gone? The one who used to sit on my lap while I showed him how to read construction blueprints, his little finger tracing the lines while he asked 1,000 questions. That was 20 years ago, a lifetime ago. His lawyer, Thomas Bradshaw, leaned in close, whispering something in Daniel's ear, and my son laughed. Actually laughed. And oh, that sound! It cut right through me like a blade. I knew that laugh. It was the same one he'd used 6 months ago at Christmas dinner when he looked around the table at his own children, at his sister, and suggested so casually that Grandpa was losing his mind. The same laugh when he told my grandkids, my precious grandchildren, that their grandfather couldn't be trusted anymore, that I was, what did he call me? Oh yes, deteriorating. Before we go any further, please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from in the comments. That way I can see how far my story has traveled, because what I'm about to tell you, it might save someone else from the nightmare I've been living through. My lawyer, Sarah Chen, touched my elbow so gently I almost didn't feel it. Mr. Williams, are you ready? Ready? Was I ready to face my own flesh and blood in court? Was I ready to watch my son try to destroy me? I nodded, feeling the weight of that manila envelope in my jacket pocket. Inside were 3 pieces of paper, just 3, but those 3 pages were going to wipe that smug smile off Thomas Bradshaw's face faster than ice melts in July. Let's get this over with, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, dark oak paneling that probably witnessed 1,000 family tragedies, harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look sickly, and rows of empty seats that echoed with loneliness. Daniel had already positioned himself at the plaintiff's table, and sweet Jesus, that suit he was wearing probably cost more than I used to pay my best crew chief for 2 months' work. Thomas sat beside him, arranging his papers with these big theatrical gestures like he was performing for an invisible audience. I took my seat next to Sarah and immediately felt it, my son's stare burning into the side of my face. When I finally looked up, he didn't even have the decency to look away. No, he just gave me that expression, that pitying, condescending look he'd perfected over the past year. Poor old Dad doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't know what's good for him. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. All rise. The bailiff's voice jolted me back to reality. Justice Margaret Henderson entered, and I'll never forget her. Late 50s, steel gray hair pulled back tight, and these eyes, these sharp, knowing eyes that said she'd heard every lie, every excuse, every manipulation tactic in the book. 30 years on the bench will do that to you. We're here today, she began, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife, regarding the petition filed by Daniel Williams. Mr. Williams seeks to have his father, James Williams, declared mentally incompetent and to gain conservatorship over his estate and business holdings. Is that correct? Thomas Bradshaw stood up, buttoning his designer suit jacket with this flourish that made me want to throw something. Yes, Your Honor, we appreciate the court's time today. This is such a difficult matter for the family. He paused, and I swear he was trying to look choked up, but we believe it's necessary for James Williams' own protection. Protection. That word echoed in my head like a bad joke. Protection. That's what he was calling this betrayal, this theft? Mr. Williams? Judge Henderson looked me directly, and I felt 71 years of life pressing down on my shoulders. I do, Your Honor. My voice came out strong, steady. 68 years old, and I could still project across a construction site when I needed to. Some things you never forget. Very well. Mr. Bradshaw, you may call your first witness." Thomas smiled. Oh, that smile. It was the smile of a man who thought he'd already won, the smile of someone who'd counted the money before the job was done. The petitioner calls Dr. Raymond Walsh. I watched as this man in his 50s, gray at the temples, expensive glasses perched on his nose, walked up to take the stand. Dr. Walsh, the psychiatrist. My mind flashed back to 3 months ago when Daniel had insisted I come with him to what he called a routine checkup. I'd thought it was strange that my son wanted to be in the examination room with me, but I'd told myself he was just being concerned, just being a good son. What a fool I'd been. "Dr. Walsh," Thomas began, pacing in front of the witness stand like some TV lawyer, "you examined James Williams on September 15th of this year, correct?" "That's correct." "And can you tell the court what you found?" Dr. Walsh opened his folder and my stomach dropped. "I conducted a standard cognitive assessment. Mr. Williams showed signs of memory impairment, difficulty with complex decision-making, and some confusion regarding recent events." I felt Sarah tense beside me. She leaned over, her breath warm against my ear. "He's setting the foundation. Don't react." Don't react? How could I not react when this stranger was sitting there, calmly destroying my life with lies? "In your professional opinion," Thomas continued, his voice dripping with false concern, "is James Williams capable of managing a multi-million-dollar construction business and making sound financial decisions?" Dr. Walsh hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for me to catch it. "Based on my examination, I have concerns about his capacity to handle complex business matters without assistance." "Thank you, Doctor." Thomas turned back to his table, that satisfied smile plastered across his face. "No further questions." Sarah stood up, and I saw something shift in her posture. She was young, barely 35, but she had this focus, this intensity that reminded me of myself 40 years ago when I was building my company from nothing. "Dr. Walsh," she began, her voice sharp and clear, "how long was your examination of Mr. Williams?" "Approximately 45 minutes."
45 minutes, and during that entire time, Mr. Williams' son was present in the room, correct? Yes, that's correct. Did you find that unusual, a 68-year-old man needing his son present for a private medical examination? Dr. Walsh shifted in his seat, and I saw the first crack in his composure. "The son requested to be present. I didn't object." "I didn't ask if you objected, doctor. I asked if Mr. Williams requested his son be there." I don't recall him specifically requesting it, no." "No." Sarah let that word hang in the air. "Now, these signs of confusion you mentioned, can you give us specific examples?" Dr. Walsh flipped through his notes. He couldn't recall the exact date of a business meeting that had occurred several weeks prior. He seemed uncertain about recent financial transactions. "Did you verify whether these meetings or transactions actually occurred, or did you simply accept that Mr. Williams should have remembered them?" "I based my assessment on standard tests and observations. Observations influenced by information provided by the son who stood to benefit from your diagnosis?" "Objection!" Thomas was on his feet. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Henderson said, but I could see her making a note on her pad. Sarah wasn't done. "Dr. Walsh, did you conduct any follow-up examinations?" "No." "Did you review Mr. Williams' medical history from his primary physician?" "I was provided with some background by the family. By Daniel Williams specifically." Another pause, another crack. "Yes." Sarah nodded slowly and sat down. No further questions. Over the next hour, I watched Thomas parade 3 more witnesses through that courtroom, an accountant who testified about irregularities in the company books that I'd supposedly authorized, a former employee, someone I'd fired for incompetence 6 months ago, who claimed I'd been confused during meetings, and then he called Patricia. Daniel's wife walked up to that stand wearing all black like she'd already buried me. Before Thomas even asked his first question, she pulled out a tissue and dabbed at her eyes. "Mrs. Williams," Thomas said, his voice soft and gentle, like he was talking to a wounded bird, "this must be so difficult for you." "It is." Patricia's voice broke just slightly, perfectly timed. "I love my father-in-law. We all do. We're just so worried about him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and call her the liar she was. "Can you describe some instances that concerned you?" Patricia nodded, dabbing at those dry eyes again. "Last Thanksgiving, he forgot several of our family members' names. At Christmas, he gave my daughter Emma the same present twice, like he didn't remember he'd already given her one." She paused for effect. "And then in January, he called Daniel at 3 in the morning, completely disoriented, claiming someone had broken into his house." My hands clenched into fists. I remembered that night. There had been someone trying to break into my house. The police came. They found tool marks on my back door. But in Patricia's version, I'd just imagined the whole thing. I was just a confused old man seeing shadows. "And the business?" Thomas prompted. "Did you observe any concerning behavior regarding the business?" "Daniel would come home devastated," Patricia said, and now the tears were really flowing, or pretending to flow. "His father had made these decisions without consulting anyone. Contracts signed with companies we'd never heard of. Money transferred to accounts Daniel didn't recognize. It was clear something was terribly wrong." Sarah's cross-examination was brief but pointed. "Mrs. Williams, your husband stands to inherit a significant amount if he gains control of his father's assets, correct?" "This isn't about money," Patricia said quickly, too quickly. "I didn't ask what it was about. I asked if your husband would benefit financially, yes or no." Patricia's perfectly made-up face tightened. "Yes, eventually, but that's not why we're—" No further questions. Finally, after what felt like hours of torture, Thomas called Daniel to the stand. My son walked up there with his head held high, like he was the victim in all of this, like I was the one who'd betrayed him. He placed his hand on that Bible and swore to tell the truth, and I wondered, did he even remember what truth meant anymore? Or had ambition and greed burned that out of him? "Daniel," he used his first name like they were old friends, which of course they were, "tell the court about your relationship with your father." And this is where my heart truly broke. "He was my hero growing up," Daniel said, and his voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe some part of my boy was still in there, buried under all the lies. "He built Williams Construction from absolutely nothing, taught me everything about the business, about integrity, about hard work. I always thought—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I always thought I'd work alongside him forever, you know? Eventually take over when he was ready to retire. That was the dream." "And what changed?" Daniel's expression shifted, morphing into this mask of concern that made me sick. "About a year ago, I started noticing things, small things at first. He'd forget meetings, make decisions that didn't make sense. But then it got worse. He started signing contracts without reading them. He transferred $200,000 to a vendor we'd never used before, wouldn't explain why. And when I questioned him, when I tried to help," his voice rose, filled with false hurt, "he'd get defensive, angry. He accused me of trying to steal from him." That must have been incredibly painful. It was. Daniel looked directly at me, and for just a second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt? Doubt? "Because I love my father, but I can't watch him destroy everything he built. And I can't let him put our employees' livelihoods at risk because he's not capable of running the company anymore." The lies dripped from his mouth like poison, and I had to grip the armrests of my chair to keep from standing up and shouting the truth. What you're about to hear next, this changes everything. Stay with me.
Thomas nodded sympathetically at my son, this theatrical display of fake compassion that made my blood boil. "Why do you believe you should be granted conservatorship?" Daniel took a deep breath, playing his part perfectly. Because I've been working at Williams Construction for 20 years. I know the business inside and out. I've been handling most of the day-to-day operations anyway for the past year, and he paused, looking down at his hands like he was struggling with emotion. Because someone needs to protect my father from himself before it's too late, before he loses everything. Thank you, Daniel. Thomas gave him an encouraging smile. No further questions. Judge Henderson looked at Sarah. Cross-examination? Sarah stood up, and I saw something flicker across Daniel's face. Not quite fear, but close, like he was suddenly realizing he might have underestimated her. Big mistake, son. Big mistake. Mr. Williams, Sarah began, her voice crisp and professional. You said you've been handling most of the day-to-day operations of the company. For how long exactly? The last 6 months or so. And during that time, has the company's profitability increased or decreased? Daniel hesitated, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out where she was going with this. There have been some market challenges. I didn't ask about market challenges. I asked a simple question. Has profitability increased or decreased? Yes or no? It's decreased. By how much? I don't have the exact figures in front of me. Sarah picked up a document from our table, holding it up like a weapon. According to the company's quarterly reports, which I have right here, profitability has decreased by 18% since you took over daily operations. Is that accurate? Daniel's jaw tightened. Like I said, there were market... Yes or no, Mr. Williams? Yes. Sarah let that sink in. Let the courtroom absorb what that meant. An 18% drop. My son, who claimed to know the business inside and out, had nearly destroyed in 6 months what it took me 40 years to build. Now, Sarah continued, moving in for the kill. Mr. Williams, isn't it true that you approached your father 6 months ago with a proposal to sell Williams Construction to Apex Development Group? The color drained from Daniel's face. Oh, there it was, the first real crack in his armor. I presented it as an option to consider. And your father rejected it, didn't he? He said it wasn't the right time to sell the company he'd spent his entire life building. He didn't think... Yes, he rejected it. And how soon after that rejection did you take him to Dr. Walsh for his so-called routine checkup? Daniel's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. That's not... Those two things aren't related. Aren't they? Sarah's voice cut through his protest like a razor. Isn't it true that Apex Development Group offered you a position as regional director if the sale went through, a position worth significantly more than your current salary? The courtroom went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that hardwood floor. That was discussed, Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, but it wasn't the reason for... And isn't it also true, Sarah continued, moving in for the kill, that Thomas Bradshaw, your attorney sitting right there, was your roommate at University of Toronto, that you've been close friends for over 20 years? Thomas shot to his feet. Your Honor, counsel is implying... I'm not implying anything, Sarah cut him off, her voice ringing clear. I'm establishing that this entire proceeding may have been orchestrated by two old friends who stand to benefit financially from taking control of James Williams' assets and selling his company out under him. That's outrageous. Thomas's face had gone bright red, a vein pulsing in his temple. Judge Henderson banged her gavel hard. Counsel, approach the bench. Now. While Sarah and Thomas argued in hushed, urgent tones with the judge, I caught Daniel's eye. He was staring at me, and for the first time I saw real fear there, mixed with anger, mixed with something else I couldn't quite read. Did he realize? Did he know that I knew everything? His hands were shaking. Good. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah and Thomas returned to their seats, both looking tense. We'll take a 15-minute recess, Judge Henderson announced, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. When we return, the defense will present its case.
The moment she left the room, Thomas practically lunged towards Daniel, whispering frantically in his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Daniel's face going paler and paler with each passing second. Whatever Thomas was telling him, it wasn't good news. Sarah touched my arm gently. That went very well. We've established serious doubt about their motives, but Mr. Williams, I need to ask you something. What? She lowered her voice even further. You told me you had evidence, proof that Daniel has been embezzling from the company. Where is it? I patted my jacket pocket, feeling that envelope like a loaded gun. Right here. Why haven't you given it to me yet? I need to review it before presenting it to the court. Because, I said quietly, looking across the courtroom at my son's panicked face, I want to see his expression when I present it. I want everyone in this room to see what he really is.
Sarah looked concerned, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. Mr. Williams, that's not how we should handle this. We need to follow proper— Trust me, I interrupted, my voice hard as steel. I built a $40 million company from a single pickup truck and a toolbox. I know how to handle this. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Maybe she saw something in my face. Maybe she understood that this wasn't just about winning a case. This was about justice, about truth, about a father confronting the son who'd betrayed everything he'd been taught. When court resumed, Sarah called her first witness, my primary care physician, Dr. Ellen Kowalski. Dr. Kowalski was everything Dr. Walsh wasn't: genuine, thorough, honest. She'd been my doctor for 20 years, knew me better than almost anyone. Dr. Kowalski, Sarah began, how would you characterize Mr. Williams' health, both physical and mental? Excellent, Dr. Kowalski said firmly. James is in better shape than most men 20 years younger. He comes in for regular checkups, follows medical advice, and I've seen absolutely no signs of cognitive decline in any of our appointments. Have you ever had concerns about his mental competency? Never. He's sharp, decisive, remembers details from years ago. Frankly, I wish all my patients had his mental clarity. Thomas's cross-examination was brief and unsuccessful. Dr. Kowalski didn't budge an inch. Next came Marcus Chen, my CFO for 15 years. Marcus had been with me through thick and thin, had helped build Williams Construction into what it was today. Mr. Chen, Sarah asked, in your professional capacity, have you observed any decline in Mr. Williams' decision-making abilities? Absolutely not, Marcus said without hesitation. James is as sharp as ever. In fact, some of the concerns Daniel raised don't match my observations at all. James has been more engaged with the company in the past year than ever before. More engaged? Yes, he's been asking detailed questions about transactions, reviewing accounts personally, being very thorough. That's not confusion, that's due diligence. I saw Daniel shift uncomfortably in his seat. Oh yes, son, I was paying attention. I was watching everything you did. Finally, Sarah stood up and looked at the judge. The defense calls James Williams to the stand. This was it, the moment everything would change. I stood up, feeling every one of my 68 years in my bones, but also feeling more clear-headed, more focused than I had in months. I walked to that stand with my head high, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. And oh, was I going to tell the truth. Sarah took me through my background, how I'd started Williams Construction in 1982 with one crew and a dream, how I'd grown it through hard work, honest dealing, and never cutting corners, how I'd built a reputation that made Williams Construction one of the most respected firms in Ontario. Mr. Williams, Sarah said, her voice carrying through the courtroom, your son claims you've been making poor decisions, transferring money without explanation, signing questionable contracts. How do you respond to these allegations? I looked directly at Daniel, saw him sitting there with Thomas, both of them tense, waiting. I've been investigating him, I said clearly. For the past 8 months, I've been investigating my son. The courtroom exploded into whispers and gasps. Daniel's face went white as a sheet. Thomas leaned over, whispering frantically, but Daniel wasn't listening.
He was just staring at me, his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, though she knew she'd heard me perfectly well. "Could you repeat that for the court?" I said, and my voice was strong, unwavering, "I've been investigating my son for the past 8 months. What happens next, you won't believe it."
Judge Henderson leaned forward, her eyes sharp and focused. "Mr. Williams, that's a serious statement. Can you elaborate?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for, dreading, anticipating. Last spring, I noticed some irregularities in our company accounts. Small amounts at first, just a few $1,000s here and there being transferred to a numbered account I didn't recognize. Then it started getting bigger, much bigger. "What did you do?" Sarah prompted. "I hired a forensic accountant, privately, quietly, had him review everything going back 2 years, and I also installed monitoring software on the company's servers that tracked all transactions and email communications." I pulled the envelope from my pocket, held it up. "The results are all right here." Thomas was on his feet so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. If the defendant had evidence of criminal wrongdoing, it should have been disclosed during discovery. This is—" "Your client," I interrupted, my voice rising, "filed a petition claiming I'm mentally incompetent, that I'm confused, that I can't be trusted to run my own company. I'd like to present evidence proving not only that I'm perfectly competent, but that this entire proceeding is a fraud designed to prevent me from exposing my son's embezzlement and selling my company for his own profit." The courtroom erupted. People were talking over each other, voices rising. Judge Henderson banged her gavel repeatedly, the sharp cracks echoing off the walls. "Order! I will have order in my courtroom." When the noise finally died down, she pointed at me. "Mr. Williams, do you have this evidence with you?" I held up the envelope. "Yes, Your Honor. Bank records, email exchanges, and security camera footage from my office. All of it proving that my son has been systematically stealing from Williams Construction, and that he concocted this entire conservatorship scheme to prevent me from going to the police." "Dad, no!" Daniel's voice cracked across the courtroom. "That's not true. You're confused. You're not thinking clearly." Confused? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this boy I'd taught everything to, and I felt something break inside my chest. Confused? Really, Daniel? Is that what we're going with? I opened the envelope and pulled out a printed email. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Everything inside me was on fire, but on the outside, I was calm. "This," I said, holding up the paper, "is an email from Daniel Williams to Thomas Bradshaw, dated 6 months ago. Let me read it for the court. We need to move on the old man before he figures it out. If we can get him declared incompetent, I can sell to Apex and bury the evidence. The conservatorship is our best play." The silence that followed was absolute, complete, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Thomas's face had gone from red to gray. He looked like he might actually be sick. That was taken out of context. You can't just—" "Really?" I pulled out another document. "How about the bank records showing you, Mr. Bradshaw, have been receiving monthly payments from my son for the past year, payments that coincidentally started the exact same month the embezzlement began?" Judge Henderson's face had gone dark as a thundercloud. "Mr. Bradshaw, is this true?" Thomas looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the floor. Neither of them said a word. "Mr. Bradshaw," Judge Henderson's voice cracked like a whip, "I asked you a question. Is this true?" "Your Honor," Thomas's voice was shaking, "I'd like to request a recess to consult with my client." "Denied. Mr. Williams, approach the bench with that evidence, now." I walked up there, my legs steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I handed her the envelope, watched as she pulled out page after page.
bank statements showing transfers of company money to Daniel's personal account, emails between Daniel and Thomas plotting this whole charade, security footage timestamps showing Daniel accessing files he had no authorization to see. 5 minutes of absolute silence while Judge Henderson reviewed everything. I could hear Daniel breathing heavily behind me, could feel his panic like a living thing in the room. Finally, she looked up, and her expression was terrifying in her fury. "Gentlemen, you will remain in this courtroom. Bailiff, contact the Crown Attorney's office immediately. I believe we may be looking at charges of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and perjury." That's when Daniel finally found his voice. "Dad, please." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed—" "Needed what?" I turned to face him fully, and my voice came out harsh, broken. "Needed to steal from me? Needed to have me declared insane? Needed to sell my life's work to the highest bidder so you could get a fancy title and a big paycheck? That's not fair." Daniel's voice rose, desperation creeping in. "I worked for that company my entire adult life. I gave you everything. I deserved—" "You deserved what I chose to give you, which would have been the whole company eventually if you'd just been patient, if you'd been honest, if you'd remembered a single thing I taught you about integrity and hard work. But you couldn't wait, could you? You wanted it now. You wanted the sale to Apex, the big payout, the corner office. You wanted to be important without earning it." "I earned it," Daniel shouted back, and tears were streaming down his face now. 20 years, Dad. 20 years of being in your shadow. 20 years of yes, sir, and no, sir, and never being good enough, never being you." And there it was, the truth beneath all the lies. My son's voice broke on those last words, and I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd try so hard to please me, who'd wake up early to come to job sites, who'd beam of pride when I praised his work. When did I stop seeing him? When did he stop being my son and become just another employee, another person who didn't quite measure up? But that didn't excuse what he'd done. It couldn't. "So you decided to steal from me," I said quietly. "You decided to have me declared incompetent. You decided to destroy me because I didn't give you what you wanted fast enough." Patricia was crying in the gallery, her carefully applied makeup running down her face. Real tears now, not the crocodile tears from her testimony. Daniel's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Thomas said it would be simple, that we'd just get conservatorship, and then—" "Mr. Williams," Judge Henderson's voice cut through the moment like a blade, "I strongly suggest you stop talking immediately and invoke your right to remain silent." But Daniel wasn't listening. "I messed up. I know I messed up. But please, Dad, please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll pay everything back. You can't fix this." And my voice cracked for the first time. "You can't fix what you've broken, son." Judge Henderson banged her gavel. "Mr. Williams, Daniel Williams, I am dismissing this petition immediately. Furthermore, I am referring this entire matter to the Crown Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Mr. Bradshaw, you will surrender your phone, your computer, and any other devices you used in communications with Daniel Williams. You will also face an immediate investigation by the Law Society."
She turned to Daniel. "Daniel Williams, you are hereby ordered to surrender all access to Williams Construction accounts, facilities, and records pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. You are not to contact your father except through legal counsel. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded mutely, tears still streaming down his face. "This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through my bones. As the bailiff moved to take Daniel and Thomas into custody for processing, my son turned to me one last time. His eyes were red, his face blotchy with tears. "Was it worth it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Destroying your own family? Was it worth it, Dad?" I looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt something inside me die. "I didn't destroy our family, Daniel. You did that all by yourself." The bailiff led him away, and I watched my son go, watched him walk out of that courtroom in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confident posture broken. Sarah touched my arm. "Mr. Williams, we should go. There's going to be a media circus outside." But I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching the doors swing closed behind Daniel, feeling like someone had hollowed me out and left nothing but empty space. This is where most people think the story ends. But they're wrong. The next 3 months were a special kind of hell. The media had a field day. Construction magnate's son arrested for embezzlement. Father exposes son's plot in shocking courtroom revelation. The headlines were everywhere, on every news site, every paper. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting statements, wanting interviews, wanting me to tell them how it felt to send my own son to prison. How did it feel? Like my heart had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. Like every happy memory with Daniel had been tainted, poisoned by what he'd done. Like I'd failed as a father in some fundamental, irreparable way. The company survived, barely. Marcus worked overtime to reassure clients, to rebuild trust, to show them that Williams Construction was still reliable, still honest. We lost 3 major contracts anyway. Word gets around fast in this business. Daniel pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The Crown Attorney was pushing for 7 years, but his lawyer managed to negotiate it down to 5. He'd probably serve 3 with good behavior. 3 years. My son would spend 3 years in prison because of me. No, because of himself, because of his choices. I had to keep reminding myself of that. Thomas Bradshaw was disbarred and received a similar sentence. His career, his reputation, everything he'd built, gone. Part of me felt bad about that. Part of me remembered the young man who'd been Daniel's friend, who'd come to our house for dinners and holidays. But he'd made his choice too. Patricia filed for divorce 2 weeks after the trial. She took Emma and the twins, Lucas and Sophie, and moved back to Vancouver to be near her parents. I tried to maintain contact with my grandchildren, sent them emails, tried to call, but Patricia, she made it difficult. Maybe she blamed me. Maybe she thought I should have handled it differently, kept it in the family, not involved the courts. Maybe she was right. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, replaying every moment, every decision, wondering if there had been another way, if I could have confronted Daniel privately, given him a chance to make things right before exposing everything in court. But then I'd remember his face in that courtroom, the way he'd laughed with Thomas Bradshaw, the way Patricia had lied so smoothly on that stand, the way they'd all been so confident, so certain they could take everything from me. And I'd know I'd made the only choice I could live with. My daughter, Rachel, called me every week from Montreal. She'd been horrified by what Daniel had done, couldn't believe her brother had been capable of such betrayal. "Dad," she said during one of our calls, her voice thick with emotion, "you did the right thing. I know it hurts. I know it's tearing you apart, but you did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked, and I hated how broken my voice sounded. "He's my son, Rachel, my boy, and I put him in prison." "He put himself in prison," she said firmly. "Dad, you taught us that actions have consequences. You taught us that integrity matters more than comfort, that honesty matters more than money. Daniel forgot those lessons. That's not your fault." "Then why does it feel like it is?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're a good man,
and good men always wonder if they could have done more. Now, sitting in my office at Williams' construction headquarters 3 months after that terrible day in court, I looked at the blueprints spread across my desk. A new condo development project, 30 units, prime location, the kind of contract that could help rebuild what we'd lost. The company was slowly recovering. Marcus had restructured our finances, brought in new clients, convinced old ones to give us another chance. We were surviving, but survival wasn't the same as living. I thought about Daniel every day, wondered how he was doing, if he was okay, if he'd made friends or enemies in there. I wanted to visit him, but the lawyers said it wasn't a good idea yet. Too soon, too raw. Besides, what would I even say to him? Sarah Chen had told me I should be proud of what I'd done, that I'd stood up for what was right, that I refused to let corruption and greed win. But pride felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, not when the cost had been my son. There was a knock on my office door. "Mr. Williams, there's someone here to see you." I looked up, expecting another reporter or maybe a client. Instead, a young woman in her 20s stepped into my office, and my heart stopped. She had Daniel's eyes, my late wife Elizabeth's smile, my granddaughter. "Emma?" "Hi, Grandpa," she said quietly, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she should come in or run away. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "What are you doing here? Does your mother know you're—"
"I'm 23 years old," Emma interrupted gently. "I don't need Mom's permission to visit my grandfather." She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other across the expanse of my desk, across the months of silence and pain and lost connection. Then she walked around the desk and hugged me, and I broke. All the strength I'd been holding on to, all the composure and confidence and certainty, it all crumbled. I hugged my granddaughter, and I cried like I hadn't cried since Elizabeth died. Great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. "I'm sorry," I gasped out between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." "I know, Grandpa." She was crying too, her tears soaking into my shirt. "I know." When we finally pulled apart, we both grabbed tissues and tried to compose ourselves. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, and she sat down. I sat too, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. "I came because I needed to tell you something," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't see what Dad was doing. I should have known something was wrong. All those late-night phone calls, all those secret meetings with Uncle Thomas, I didn't want to believe my dad could do something like that. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. I know, but I also know what he did was horrible. What he and Mom did, lying in court like that. And I know Mom won't let you see Lucas and Sophie, and that's not fair. They ask about you all the time, you know. They miss their grandpa." My throat tightened. "I miss them too. Mom says you chose the company over family, that you cared more about money than about us." Emma looked me straight in the eye. "But I don't believe that. I think you chose what was right over what was easy. And that took guts, Grandpa. That took real courage." "It doesn't feel like courage," I said quietly. "It feels like I lost everything that mattered." "You didn't lose me," Emma smiled through her tears. "You didn't lose Aunt Rachel or Uncle David. You didn't lose the people who know what kind of man you really are." We talked for another hour about school, her studies in construction management at Ryerson, about her plans for the future. And then she said something that gave me the first real hope I'd felt in months. "Actually, I was hoping you might need an intern this summer. I'd really like to learn the family business, the real family business, from someone who built it with integrity instead of just inheriting it and trying to steal it." I looked at this young woman, my granddaughter, with her determination and her compassion and her belief in doing the right thing, and I saw a future I'd thought was lost forever. When can you start? But this wasn't quite the ending I thought it would be.
That evening, I drove back to my house in the Beaches neighborhood, the same house where I lived for 30 years, where I'd raised Daniel and Rachel, where Elizabeth had died 5 years ago, leaving me alone in rooms that still smelled like her perfume sometimes when I missed her most. The same house where Patricia had claimed I'd imagined a break-in, where my son had stood in the kitchen on Christmas Day and suggested to everyone that I was losing my mind. I poured myself a whiskey, Elizabeth's favorite brand that I kept in the cabinet for special occasions or particularly hard days. This qualified as both. I sat on the back deck, watching the sunset paint Lake Ontario in shades of orange and purple and gold, and I let myself think about everything I'd lost. My son, my daughter-in-law, 2 of my grandchildren, at least for now, countless sleepless nights, more heartache than I thought one person could contain without breaking apart completely. But I'd also gained something, the truth, my integrity, the knowledge that when it mattered most, when it would have been so easy to look the other way, to pretend I didn't see what was happening, to let family loyalty override everything else, I'd chosen what was right, even when it cost me everything. My phone buzzed, a text message from Rachel. "Just talked to Emma. So proud of both of you. Love you, Dad." Then another one, this time from Marcus. "Signed the Riverside contract. We're back, boss." And one more from Sarah Chen. "The Crown Attorney wants to meet next week about the restitution. Looks like you'll recover most of what Daniel took. You did good, Mr. Williams." I thought about Daniel, sitting in a prison cell somewhere, probably replaying his own version of these events, probably convincing himself he was the victim, that I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving. Or maybe he was finally understanding what he'd done, what he'd thrown away. I hoped it was the latter. I hoped my son was learning something in there about consequences, about integrity, about the difference between wanting something and earning it. But I couldn't control that. I could only control my own choices. Tell me in the comments what you think. Was I right to expose him? Should I have handled it differently? And if you've dealt with something similar, if you've had to choose between family and doing what's right, share your story below. You're not alone. None of us are alone in these impossible choices. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life, about choosing integrity over comfort, about doing the hard thing because it's the right thing, because that's what matters in the end, isn't it? Not the money, not the company, not even the family that betrays you. What matters is looking at yourself in the mirror and knowing you did the right thing, even when it broke your heart, even when it cost you everything. I raised my glass to the setting sun, to Elizabeth's memory, to the granddaughter who'd chosen courage over comfort, to the company I'd built with my own 2 hands. To doing the right thing, I said quietly to the evening air, even when it costs you everything. The sun dipped below the horizon and darkness crept across the water, but there were stars coming out, one by one, pinpricks of light in the gathering dark. Tomorrow, I'd be back in the office. Emma would start her internship in a few weeks. Marcus had plans to pitch 3 new clients. Life would go on. But tonight, I let myself grieve. For the son I'd lost, for the family that had fractured, for the innocence I'd had before I discovered what my own child was capable of. Both things could be true. Both were necessary. You mourn what you've lost, and you build something new from what remains. That's what it means to be a Williams. We build things to last. We tell the truth no matter the cost. We pay the price for our principles, and we never, ever compromise on what's right, even when it breaks our hearts into 1,000 pieces. I sat there as the stars came out, as the temperature dropped and the breeze off the lake grew cold. I sat there with my whiskey and my memories and my grief and my hard-won integrity. And slowly, painfully, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I'd survived this. Maybe we'd all survive this. The house was dark and quiet when I finally went inside, but it wasn't empty. Not really. It was filled with ghosts of better days, yes, but also with the promise of new ones, with Emma's laughter, with the possibility of Lucas and Sophie, when they were old enough to understand, seeking me out the way Emma had, with the knowledge that I'd stood my ground when it mattered most. I climbed into bed, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness, and for the first time in 3 months, I slept through the night. No nightmares, no 3 a.m. wake-ups replaying the courtroom scene over and over. Just sleep. Deep and dreamless and healing. Because that's the thing they don't tell you about doing the right thing. It doesn't make the pain go away. It doesn't magically fix everything. It doesn't bring back what you've lost. But it does let you sleep at night. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that has to be enough. The morning sun came through my window, bright and warm and full of promise. A new day, a new beginning. I got up, made my coffee, and started getting ready for work. William's construction wasn't going to rebuild itself, and neither was I. But we'd both endure. We'd both survive, because that's what we do. We Williams. We build. We endure. We stand for what's right, no matter the cost. No matter how much it hurts, no matter what.